Welcome, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of our Generational Wealth series. Today we will be talking about a topic which is very, very interesting: legacy. Your legacy. How do we create a legacy? How do we build a legacy? And we would look at two critical themes this evening. The first theme being the value of your name, and the second theme, how your life story can affect your legacy or impact on your legacy. Buckle up, let's get into it, and let's start. Let's start. Yeah, thank you very much, and welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. For those who are just joining, we thank you so much for your loyalty. We thank you for being with us every single week. Um, Today, as I indicated earlier, we are going to be talking about our legacy, how we build our legacy. Two critical themes for this evening. The first one would be on the value of your name, and the second theme would be on how we use our names, how our life stories rather shape our legacy. So I would want to start this by just sharing a short story. Um, in one of our businesses, our digital financial services business, we set up a Twitter account some years ago, and the name of the institution we set up this Twitter account for is Kingston Financial Credit. So the brand is actually maroon, like deep red and white. The brand, the logo is maroon, deep maroon red and white. And the acronyms of this institution is KFC. So when we set up this this Twitter account, I think we did just the first tweet or the second tweet. We got someone, some lady, an entrepreneur in the USA. She picked up the tweet and she wrote under our tweet and tagged KFC, the chicken brand, and said to them, "You guys came after me just for using some tags which are linked to your name. Come and see what this company is doing. They have your full name, they have your colors, they are in Africa. Come and see what they are doing." And the lady tagged KFC. And immediately we picked it up and we responded. And our response was very clear. One, we have nothing to do with fried chicken. We have nothing to do with Kentucky. What we are is a digital financial services institution, and we have nothing to do with chicken. And that's how it ended. We got a few comments from other people on the Twitter feed, and that particular story came and passed. Why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story just to say that our names are very valuable. The story I just told you is linked to a company, but if we take it on a personal basis, and we look at what our names are. The name we carry are powerful legacy concepts that we will need to transfer to the next generation. And we need to be certain that that name, when transferred to the next generation, will be a name that our children or our children's children will be happy or will be proud to carry. When you think of a name, you think of a name, in the African context, you would have names that are given either because of a specific season. In countries like Ghana, they will give you a name based on the day you were born. In other countries, they will give you, especially in Africa, they will give you a name that is linked to a specific period in the lives of the parents of the child. And this name is what carries you through your life and becomes a part of who you are, what you are, and who you intend to become. And when you carry that name, it becomes an important component of your legacy that you hand over to your children. A simple example is when you hear the name Barack Obama, you hear George W. Bush, you hear Donald Trump, immediately what comes to your mind is those are the names of the former presidents of the United States. But when you hear the name Osama bin Laden, the immediate thought that comes to your mind is that is probably the most known person related to terrorism around the world. And those names that I've just mentioned would solicit different emotions in different people. Some people would immediately know that the former presidents of the United States are people who carried a certain authority over the world. They call them the leaders of the free world. And Osama bin Laden, in his case, would be the ruler of, or the supreme leader of terrorism around the world. The effect of our names while we are alive and the effect of our names while we are gone is actually much stronger when we are gone. Because when we hand it over, it becomes part of the assets that we transfer to the generation that is unborn. It's part of what we transfer to the generation that is unborn. And when anyone produces a product, take companies like BMW, Mercedes, Benz, Jaguar. They take huge pride. Coca-Cola, they take huge pride in their names. And that's what actually gives them what is called in the economic environment, in the business environment, their brand equity. Brand equity, the brand equity that they have is actually tied to their name, their logo, and the perceptions that people have about them. So they make sure they manufacture the product, test it, make sure that everything about the product works in the way it should work. And the last thing they put on it is their name. So that when the car drives past, when the car approaches, the standout feature that you would see in the car is their name, to say that we give it we put our seal on it, we put our stamp on it to say that we are the ones who manufactured this car. So you should trust it because of the value they have created, the perception that the public has about them. So from a corporate perspective, it is extremely important that the name that your brand carries should evoke a positive emotion in your buying public. When we set out to create our company, Endless Life Group, it took us some time and actually thinking of what really do we want to achieve with this company. And the name Endless Life became really an important factor of all the things that we do, so that whatever we do has to be able to impact people's lives now and beyond us. And that's why we got to the name Endless Life. So, in essence, when you consider your legacy, very important things, these two elements that we are discussing tonight are very important. The value of your name being the first. When you craft your life story, there are always twists and turns in our lives. You start off in a specific place, and for some reason you end up in another place, a place that you may not even have imagined that you would be. I set out just before, after I had left university in Cameroon. I had two options of where I wanted to go. Okay. The first option was that I was going to go to the United States. I had an admission in a college called Gardner Webb College. And the second option was that I was going to go to Holland in the University of Utrecht. And just when I was considering those two options, a friend of mine gave me a call and said he is in South Africa, and he's found South Africa a very fascinating place, and he thinks that we should move there. At the time, South Africa just came out of apartheid. South Africa was not in anyone's radar, and it became and we considered it. And we became amongst the first Cameroonians to make a trip out here in South Africa. And quite frankly, that specific detail has become a major part of my life story and will become a major part of the legacy that I would hand down to my children. So we start off in a specific area. We start off having all these plans in our heads, all these thoughts of what we are going to do, how we are going to do it. And we end up in a place where we did not intend. Yeah. So as I was speaking, I shared with you the element of the value of your name. I spoke about the individual name, which is your specific name your name as an individual. I spoke about how valuable people consider their names when when they are looking at wealth transfer and legacy transfer to the next generation. And I would use this story as a transition into the aspect of how your life story can shape your legacy, and it's linked to the value of your name. So there was a man who lived in 1888 called Alfred Nobel, and he was a very, very powerful Swedish entrepreneur. And he was an inventor, he was an entrepreneur, he was a manufacturer. And he was sitting in a cafe in Paris once, and his brother just died in Sweden. He didn't know anything about it. But the headlines in the newspaper in France read the The entrepreneur of death is dead, and they put his name. But in fact, the person who had died was a senior brother who was not Alfred, but Ludwig. Why was he? Why did the paper call him the angel of the entrepreneur of death? The paper called him the entrepreneur of death because he was the inventor and manufacturer of ballistics and dynamites that were used in the World War. And he was the manufacturer of these deadly devices that have been used in different wars, bullets and things like that. So he was named the entrepreneur of death. But unfortunately, he had the, the very interesting experience of seeing what people would say about him, seeing how his name would be dragged in the mud in his absence. And he made a decision a few years later of how to change that. What did he do? He sat down and wrote out his will and testament, and he took all his wealth, all his resources that he had generated, the financial capital that he had generated, and he put it in a fund. He split that after he had done all what he had to do for his family. He had no children, by the way. He decided to split the fund into 5 parts, and 4 parts for people who would make progress in different scientific areas, and the one and most important part was what is now known as the Nobel Peace Prize, the person who will contribute the most to peace in the world. And from 1995 to date, this guy is dead and gone. His name is still being spoken about on an annual basis as the Nobel Peace Prize is issued to the 5 categories that he had selected and put in place for as part of his legacy. He used that newspaper clipping, that newspaper headline, to turn around all the negative publicity that surrounded his name. So I'm saying this just to get into the fact that there is a possibility, if the name we carry solicits negative emotions in our communities and amongst our friends. If our name represents something that we will not be proud to hand over to our children or our children's children, there is a possibility to look at what we can do about it right now. He went ahead and changed his name from the entrepreneur of death to the Nobel Peace Prize donor. And everyone who has received the prize is recognized around the world, and his name is being propagated around the world, not as the manufacturer of the ballistics and dynamites and all of that which was used during the world wars, but as the person who is the donor and the contributor to world peace. So everyone who has received the prize has actually propelled his name and projected his name in another light. The next aspect is that our life story, like the story of Alfred Ludwig that we are talking about, actually shapes our legacy. So he looked at his life and decided to shape the legacy in the way in which he would want to transfer to his children and to the next generation. In fact, to those of us living now, we would, without having gone into the details to find out all these things, we would not even know that he was referred at the time as the entrepreneur of death. So in our lives, there are certain themes as we prepare to transfer our name, to transfer a wealth legacy to our children and our children's children. We would need to craft what we call legacy themes. So certain areas of our lives that have impacted our story to the point where when we hand over our names, when we hand over our legacy to the next generation, it would be a valuable legacy that we are handing over. The first, in fact, this theme was crafted by Richard Campbell. He was the first person who propagated it, and as he propagated the theme, it became a very, very important component of how people craft their legacy letters, which we will deal with in the next session. How people craft their legacy letters and tell the next generation about who they are and where they come from and how they got to where they got to, how they did what they did, and all of that. So in essence, he pulled everything together into 10 themes. The first one is called the fork in the road. So you start off in a specific area and you think, I see there's some comments here. Okay, let's see. Comment saying legacy themes, impactful stories to hand over to the next generation. Yeah. So, so the first one is the fork in the road. The fork in the road is actually to say that you start off and you have a specific direction. I spoke to you about my journey, where I started off. I had to go either to the United States or to Holland to school, and I ended up in South Africa. South Africa was not even a remote concept in my mind. Yeah. And when you prepare to craft this part of your story on the fork in the road, you have to consider if that something actually happened to you as a child, for example. What would have happened to you as a child which deviated you? For some people, you could have been living with your parents and maybe your parents died and then you ended up leaving the city where you were and you ended up in another city. What happened to you as you grew up from childhood up to your adult life? Yeah. And sometimes it's also about the choices that we have made through our life. And you just have to go back and rethink them, look at the choices that you've made down the road and see how that could have diverted you from something else, from something that, or a path that you were on. The second legacy concept or the second legacy theme is about the family and yourself. You have to ask yourself the question, really, who are you? What's your family about? Which family do you come from? Yeah. What was it like growing up in your family? Is there one family member that stood out in your childhood that actually shaped the way you are right now? How did that person influence you? For me, I always say it's my older brother, because he was like the life of the party every time, and he took all the beatings on our behalf and from our parents, and and he really impacted me. Unfortunately, he's not here today. Motumba is not here anymore, but there are times when I still have dreams as if we are going about doing the things we used to do when we were youngsters together. And that is well over 30 years ago. And so when you craft these legacy themes, around what your legacy would look like. This factor is also very important because where you come from, your family, your interactions are extremely important. The other aspect of the theme is what is the meaning of wealth to you? Yeah. When I talk about wealth, mostly, and when I hear a lot of people talk about wealth is always about money. It's always about cash. Yeah. Money dominates our global culture. Yeah. Everywhere, money dominates our global culture. But the question that you have to ask yourself is that from your childhood to adolescence through to adulthood, how do you view money? How do you view money in terms of financial security, financial capital? How did you view money? Yeah. What does money really mean to you? In this theme, you take your time and put all of this together and capture what it means to you. Is it a means of getting what you want? Is it a means of power? Is it safety? Is it freedom? You craft all of these things into your legacy, into, excuse me, as one of your legacy themes. And the fourth one is about your life's work. What you have done from when you were a child, all the things you did, leading up to what you do right now, whether it's as a profession, whether you're a professional, you could be a medical doctor, a nurse, an engineer, a banker, a technology expert, or whatever. You could be a professional sports person. How does your life's work impact who you are and who you would like your next generation to be? Has there been a dominant trait or profession that has attracted you, but you did not really end up there? Some people started off as doctors and ended as um, as lawyers. I was listening to this lady about, I think, last week. She went through medical school, graduated, started working as a doctor, and turned around and said, "You know what? This is really not what I want." And she went to law school and graduated as a lawyer. So, are there professions and skills and traits that you would have liked to be part of that you are not part of? And and they are still attractive to you. The interesting thing about our era is that at this stage where we are in the world is actually changing and shifting. And even at 50, even at 60, people have the capacity and the capability to, to switch careers completely and still excel in something else. So our life's work is also a part of it. You have to write, you have to put down some stories around that and how your life's work has impacted where you are and where you want to be. I'll end the legacy themes with the fifth one, which is your self-image and well-being. Yeah, the mind-body connection is a challenge. We all face this challenge in one way or another. Most of us may have faced health crisis. Some people would have had, things that literally stopped them dead on their tracks, and and all what they had planned suddenly changed. I know of girls that we went to school with who literally, because they fell pregnant, were kicked out of school, and they ended up not going back to school after giving birth, and their lives were diverted completely from there. So the self-image, well-being, health, and all those components affect the outcome of the legacy that we transfer. how has your emotional and your physical health affected your life till now? So you have to capture that. And then what has your emotional well-being been like interacting with people of different age groups, interacting with children, interacting with the younger generation, interacting with people who are much older than you? How has that affected you? How has that shaped you? Yeah. So in all of this, you would start to build up what, as I said earlier, what would become your legacy letter or your legacy story, which you will transfer to the next story, to the next generation. That story you will end up capturing it in a document, right? Some people will call it a will and last testament, but in fact, the element of a will is great, but a legacy letter to the generation still to born is actually a lot more softer. It's a lot more appealing. Even though you would still have a will, but a letter to the next generation telling them exactly who you are is a lot more appealing. I'm actually busy writing my dad's legacy letter. Um, I've spent some time interrogating him about it, and I'm just about completing it. I put out a challenge once, and someone tried to help, but she couldn't get through. So I'm doing it myself. And then after I finish doing his, I would now go into mine. But then, by the time we get to the legacy letter, which will be next week, I would like us to consider these 4 points as we conclude. The first one is that a powerful legacy wealth has to be created over time. A powerful legacy wealth has to be created over time. We cannot consider that, or we cannot even think that we will create a legacy wealth which will be beneficial for our children and our children's children, or even our communities, in a snap of a finger. It has to be created over time. There has to be intention behind what you are doing to be able to create that, that legacy wealth for it to be transferred. The second thing is that you have to leave such a name that your children and your children's children will be proud to carry that name. I come from a family that has a very, very proud legacy from my village. And and the name resonates with everyone from my village. And that name has moved from generations to generations to generations to the point where we in our generation now carry the name. And it would be a travesty if the name stops with me or with my generation of the family. It would be a complete travesty if the name stops with us. So we have to also do what we can to enhance the name we have received to transfer to our children in the best way possible. Another very important aspect of the legacy themes is we have to take a lot of pictures of events, of happenings. Our generation, I shudder to think that we will be lost without much legacy material that would guide our, our children to actually know our history. The biggest part of it, as an African, I come from Cameroon, is the fact that most of the young people in my generation left the country, and some of them actually swore never to come back because of how tough things became in the country. And the effects of that is that we end up having children who don't even know their roots, and they get lost in the midst of the global picture without knowing where they come from, who they are, what they, the family their parents come from. What they know is the environments in which they live. And it ends up becoming a bit of an emotional drag for the children and for the generations to come, because they're almost like they are not from the country where they are born. They are they are not from the country where their parents come from, so they are sitting in the middle of nowhere, really, literally not having a country where they come from. So pictures are very important. Take as much pictures as possible. Unfortunately, or I don't know whether it's fortunately or unfortunately, at the moment we have a situation where most pictures are either stored in this most pictures are either stored in these devices or in tablets and things like that. Hopefully, they will not be lost in the course of time. That it would be necessary for you to make sure that you store as many pictures as possible that you can pass to the next generation. And because those pictures will carry stories of your existence, of your interactions, of the things you did, of the people you interacted with, and all of that. And those stories will be transferred to the next generation as your legacy. The last thing which I will talk about in this session today is the fact that you want the generation that comes after you to be able to walk into a place in your absence and just call your name and get what they need. We want a generation that comes after you. We would want our descendants to benefit from the name we would have created in our own lifetime. And all of that would be the part of the legacy that we would have left for the generations after us. I want to thank you guys again for continuously following this series. We'll take this series to the end with a lot of information. I think in the next few sessions, I'll start putting up some slides as well, because there are some forms, there are some tables that those of you who are watching should be able to build yours for yourself, your family, and help all those who are around you to do the same as we build up to this generational wealth creation structures, go through the master plan, and we would end up with a plan and or a structure that can guide us as we navigate this journey of creating a legacy, putting in place a heritage, putting in place an inheritance of assets that the generations to come after us will be very happy and satisfied with us. And they will be able and understand the value of moving assets from one generation to the next. Thank you very much, and I look forward to connecting with you again next week. If you are connecting with us on YouTube, like and share. You are connecting with us on Facebook, like and share. You are connecting with us on LinkedIn, like and share. And put a comment. Let's have some conversations around these themes, because they are very, very important in the way in which we craft the future for the generations to come. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye bye.